Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Cerne, and I'm a security consultant at Bishop Fox, specializing in application penetration testing, cloud penetration testing, and hybrid application assessments. I also enjoy performing Internet of Things and embedded device security research as a hobby. And what kind of initially drew me into doing IoT security research was that these devices usually had a direct and unique impact on the consumer in the instance of a vulnerability. The thing that's really cool to me about IoT devices is that they're essentially puzzles, and there's usually multiple ways you can solve the puzzle to gain an intimate understanding of how these devices operate and whether or not they're vulnerable. I was particularly interested in Traeger grills because they enabled you to essentially monitor and control your grill remotely over the internet. This capability, coupled with the device's handling of what is essentially a controlled fire, raised significant safety concerns to me. Whenever I see an IoT device like this, I ask myself a few questions. In the instance of a vulnerability, are there potential direct or indirect impacts to the intended user or consumer? How can this device be communicated with, and what protocols does it use? Is there anything stopping other users from interacting with my device? In the particular case of Traeger Grills, I really wanted to answer these questions. So I ended up purchasing the embedded device used to operate the grill directly from Traeger and began my research. Just like in any security assessment, the first step when assessing an IoT device is to perform comprehensive reconnaissance. This usually involves reading user manuals and documentation, reverse engineering mobile applications, making note of any cloud or API assets that you come across that could be involved in the communication with the device, identifying how the device downloads firmware updates, reviewing the chips and interfaces on the printed circuit board and cross-referencing documentation, port scanning the device and seeing what services it's exposing, and reviewing any radio communication protocols that the device could be using. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the methods that I used to discover the vulnerability affecting Traeger grills. Ultimately, there's a lot you can look at in the reconnaissance phase, and following information gathering, generally the next step involves recovering the device's firmware, which can be recovered via a variety of methods, including sniffing the network traffic of the device during firmware downloads. You could also physically connect to the device if there's exposed interfaces, using UART or JTAG over a serial connection, or you could dump the firmware from the device's flash memory. The firmware is generally the most important piece of the puzzle, as it contains the compiled source code for the device and provides us with the most information. And in my particular case with the Traeger research, I was able to connect to the device using UART over a serial connection and download the firmware. Subsequently, I was able to patch the firmware, which enabled me to force the device to use unencrypted HTTP communications. And this allowed me to sniff the device's network traffic with the Traeger API, which led to the discovery of the vulnerability. I think one of the unfortunate things about Internet of Things is that security isn't really a huge priority for companies in the development of these devices, which kind of begs the question, how many IoT devices are in your home right now that could be subject to similar vulnerabilities? Fortunately, as a consumer, there are some proactive security measures that you can implement. Personally, I would recommend buying an IoT device from a reputable company that takes a proactive security approach. There are companies who have their products pen tested by third parties before release, and sometimes those pen test results are publicized on the internet. I would also recommend logically separating IoT devices from other devices on your home network using strategies like network segmentation. This could help prevent an exploited device from sniffing traffic or interacting with other devices on your network. Also, ensuring device firmware is updated regularly and changing any default passwords that the device may be using are good measures to take. And for things like smart grills that could have potential kinetic effects when exploited, consider disconnecting them from the internet and operating them manually instead. In conclusion, the world of IoT is both intriguing and intimidating. While it's important to consider the convenience that IoT devices can bring to your life, it's equally crucial to be aware of the potential risks, as you could be playing with fire. Thank you, and happy 4th of July.